Alright guys, so I decided to make a video on the Sony FX2.
I don't know what Sony's doing right now.
This camera seems to have triggered the entire creative community.
It's an FX3 with the A74 sensor and a really cool viewfinder.
Obviously, all the reviews have come out and it's
not well received. It's very interesting EVF.
I think the camera is in hot water.
Now, I know that's a pretty dramatic title, but hey, we gotta work with the algorithm, right? It's a feeling that I've had over the last couple months. And with the recent announcement of the Sony FX2, it's really kind of hit home for me. Why is Sony falling so far behind? How could they let this happen? And that's kind of what I wanted to cover in this video. I'm gonna try and keep it as rant-free as possible. This is not going to be a technical breakdown of the FX2 or any of Sony's different cameras. This is strictly going to be a critique of Sony from a Sony user. Let's get started. By 2019, Canon was still very much the big brand on the block. They had the largest market share. They dominated sports. Everybody was shooting on a Canon. That was until 2020. Now in 2020, you had COVID, you had riots, you had freaking TikTok. It was a crazy time to be alive, but in the camera space, there was a revolution going on. Sony had just finished doing the 1, 2, 3 knockout punch of the A7S III, the FX3, the FX6. All of these cameras had revolutionary sensors that allowed you to basically see in the dark with little to no light. You were able to do this great 10-bit codec called S-Log3, which prior to this generation of cameras had been basically unusable because of the noisiness and just the grossness of the color science. You had full frame 4K images that you could film in 24, 60, 120 with little to no crop. These cameras miniaturized the technology seen in the Sony Venice and Venice 2 and put it in the hands of the average consumer. And this made Sony the brand for creators, for sports videographers, for music video filmmakers. If you didn't shoot on a Red or an ARRI, you shot on Sony. And that brings us to the modern day. What the frick happened? In the last couple of years, Sony has lost its competitive edge. Other camera brands have constantly improved and fine-tuned their sensors and technology. Sony has remained with the same old CMOS sensor that's in the A7S III, the FX3, and a bunch of their other cameras. Now I want to be clear, I don't necessarily think that Sony should chase resolution like Canon and Lumix and Blackmagic, but you can't deny other camera brands have been making moves to improve their product for their consumers while Sony's been caught with its pants down. It's really becoming difficult to make the argument for Sony's cameras when increasingly they are becoming more and more obsolete. The FX3 is a terrific camera. However, it's also almost 5 years old at this point. Why is it still valued at almost $4,000 on every different website? If you were to ask me today, should I get an FX3 or a Lumix S1R2 or S12? I would say go with the newer cameras. And nowhere do I think this is more clear than with the FX2 debacle. I'm gonna use my laptop for this one, just so I can read off some specs. I don't wanna get these wrong. The Sony FX2 features the same 33 megapixel sensor as seen in the Sony A74. This means it can do 10-bit 4K downsampled from 7K when shooting 24 frames per second. But you get slapped with a substantial Super 35 crop when you shoot in 60 frames per second. Unlike the FX3, you can only achieve 120 FPS or 240 FPS if you step down to HD and HD 8-bit respectively. The rest of the spec sheet is pretty much the same as seen in the A74, but one pretty cool change is that now you can shoot photos in S-Log3. Also, Sony says that they have implemented a new AI chip to improve the camera's autofocus and dynamic stabilization, although there is a pretty hefty crop if you want to use the stabilization feature. The A74 is a great camera, a great photo camera. It has a horrible 26 millisecond readout. Remember how a couple of years ago people were up in arms about the readout speeds of the Sony Burano? Well, the Burano's readout speeds at 8K 24 frames per second is 18 milliseconds. I don't think anybody who is on the lookout for a potential FX3 Mark II or an FX6 Mark II, someone who's really buying a FX line camera was thinking to themselves, you know what the FX3 or FX6 need? They need an EVF. I think it's just the fact that they rehoused a photocentric sensor that leads to all of these problems. And in a day and age where camera companies all over are coming out with new, better sensors, with better writing speeds, with better color fidelity, people, including myself, didn't want a rehoused sensor that we've had for years. Anyways, I hope this didn't come across as a hate-filled video. I love cameras. I love seeing other brands making leaps and bounds in the technology that isn't just, adding a couple more digits to your resolution. I think we're living in truly a golden time for people, who buy those cameras. I just hope Sony wakes up before it's too late. Anyways, that's enough for me today. I've yapped way too long already. If you like this video, please feel free to stick around, subscribe for more content to come. I promise the next couple videos are gonna be way more lighthearted and not related to the laborious specs of different cameras. Anyways, I'll talk to y'all later. See you for now.